Um, and I'll just jump in back to I don't have any in the box right now, so I'll just kind of keep going. My second question for this panel is the climate of birth has really, really changed. Um, it's changed in the last like couple of years with COVID, 5 years, 10 years, all the different things. So I think about like what was important for me to share with somebody I was taking care of, what I would say, as a baby midwife, like back in the day versus now. So I would love if you could think of just what are some things that you feel like you've added to your discussions with birthing families that you are taking care of with today and now's like today's climate.
That's a good one. Even today, I went on a prenatal visit with a student, and she was talking to me about the observations she saw from myself and talking with clients. And what she was telling me was that the way that you really give informed choice is different than what I've seen with other providers, and not necessarily different from other midwives, but other providers. So I would start with the informed choice, and that's really in unpacking it and really knowing, is it really informed, or is it informed as long as you do what I ask you to do, and then it's informed? So that's the real thing that has changed. And even though some of my colleagues are still maybe not as supportive of some of the things that I say, in terms of, I let them know their risk, I let them know their benefits, and then I let them know what they should probably consider doing. Because they usually say, well, what would you do? Because that always comes up. And then I tell them, but you need to make a decision because you know your body, you know your life, and this is what I think you should do. But doesn't mean that's what your God, your culture, your person, your family says you should do, however you interpret that. So I think informed choice for me, and especially since I did start a lot of my medical career, not medical, a lot of my midwifery career in the medical facilities. And I was there for over a decade, and I saw a lot of times I wasn't allowed to do that. And if I did, I was always reprimanded. I was always that midwife, or Trinice's the one. I'm like, but I told them what they should do. Well, did you call ACS? Did you call? I'm like, so I got to call everybody on the patient in order for them to do what I want? Is it really informed? And they're like, stop arguing with me. you know? So it's, for me, informed choice is a big thing. And as well as access. Even this morning, I had a conversation again I had with the student where she was talking about testing. And I recall when I was at the hospital, I used to teach childbirth classes as well. And I taught childbirth classes in a large private hospital to mostly Caucasian families. And the test I was able to offer the families, I wasn't able to offer at the hospital where I had credentialing and could actually give the care. And I had a Caucasian family ask me about one particular test. And I was like, what are you talking about? So then I went to look up the test and I said, well, why don't I offer that to my families? Because I'm just in this role teaching childbirth classes, but I am in a clinical role in a hospital that mostly cares for BIPOC families. So when I told my boss I wanted to offer the test, and I called the company and offered this genetic test that we were clearly not offering at all to families, and in fact, it took the institution an additional 8 years to bring that test to the forefront, I was told I wasn't allowed to. So when I think about my ability as a midwife and what has changed is now people are informed. Internet is better, Google is better. So people can look up the things that we're not offering and question us on it. And that definitely wasn't something that was happening in the beginning of my career, and just literally shocked me. So those are two of the things I would say. I'll pass it over to Nikki.
Ebony, will you repeat the question for me? I was so hypnotized by what Tranisha was saying. I forgot what you asked. What's the question
I'm
again?
just saying, like, how has your counseling changed, right? So, like,
Oh.
I remember, like, especially being a newer practitioner, you're very focused on like what exactly you just learned because you just finished and now you're out on your own, right? And you're just like, I don't want to kill nobody. But like now that you've experienced it, you've been out there, like, how has your like counseling or just your interaction or what you feel like you want to tell people now that you're caring for?
I think my counseling now, I think because I've been doing this almost 10 years, my counseling now is a bit less hesitant. I think I feel a bit more confident in what I'm saying because I know that I've read the research. I've looked at the reports. I've done all the things for myself. And since I've done them for myself so that I can be better informed for my clients, I then give them here's what I read. This is how I came to this decision. This is how I, understand that this works. Here, you read it too, and we can talk about it. We have an extended lending library at the birth center, and I'm constantly telling people, please, please take these books. Please read these books. Please ask me questions from these books. Write a book report. I will read it. I have a red pen. I will fix it.
Girl,
Please,
not a book report.
no, if they want to. My
Yeah.
mom's an English teacher. I have skills. But the point is that I feel more emboldened now because I am a midwife and I have, realized that I don't exist I do exist in a silo, but I'm not the only one out here. And so I'm looking around at what other midwives do. And in San Diego County, the majority of the rest of the midwives are Caucasian. The majority of the rest, well, all of the rest of the birth centers are all owned by white folks. And so, I people have to wonder, what is it that Nikki is doing differently than everybody else? So I'm spending more time with my clients. I feel completely empowered to spend a whole hour with my clients answering their questions, talking to them about the smallest things, the things that people bring to them, like, oh, I saw on TikTok this one thing, and what do you think? My friend saw on Google or Instagram, I thought social media was a great thing until I found out what kind of stuff was going on at TikTok, which scares the crap out of me sometimes. But anyhow, I feel more empowered as a practitioner because I now know from my experience as well as the research that I do and the education that I continue to gather, I feel more empowered to tell my clients, yeah, I generally don't do that, but if you want me to, I will, but I don't do that. And here's why.
Mhm.
And you can't get that at your physician's office. Your physician's just going to say, yeah, we don't do that and move on. So I feel empowered to explain things to people. And I love that part of what I do.
Teaching. Mhm.
Go ahead. Oh, sorry. Pasadala Stephanie. There it
I
is.
mean, now we have to hear you say it every time.
Now I
So
know.
Yes,
that's
you
how it's just
can't.
gonna go. You
You
go,
can't
and then
stop.
Stephanie goes. Yep.
Okay. Guys, mine's complicated. So because I live in the border region, most of my clients come from Mexico. So they cross over to come see us, and we do have a clinic in Ciudad Juarez in Mexico, where the same midwives are giving prenatal appointments to save the stress of crossing every time. With the when the Trump presidency happened and COVID and all this stuff, everything got really complicated and people were being denied access to the United States, even for healthcare, which is really normal here. We go back and forth every day, and it's not a this isn't a two city, it's a one whole city that just happens to be divided by this, fence, imaginary fence. But with that, we had to enforce and be basically agents, like immigration, and be like, okay, what can you do? Here's a letter saying that you have an appointment so that you can cross. And then they would call us and let us, is it true? Who's this client at what time? What's is it? And the immigration would just, and it would turn into this daily thing. We just have to be ready to pick up the phones because we didn't know who was crossing the border and who needed information. And if we didn't answer, they wouldn't cross. And a lot of them, we had to give refunds because they didn't get to cross on time, and all of those dynamics. And with that cross-border care, also what happens is that they have their private physicians, and in Mexico, people think that people are coming to birth in El Paso for birth certificates, and maybe that's one part of it, but the reality is that they're running away from obstetric violence. I've had clients or people who I've known who have their waters ruptured, and because they didn't birth within 4 hours, they got a C-section in Mexico. I've clients come in with prodromal labor, which is when a labor starts and it lasts days and days, and it just won't advance because their doctors are doing pelvic exams and cervical exams at 32 weeks, and they won't stop, and they'll do it every week until they reach 39 and do membrane sweeps at every point. And so a lot of our clients don't really know. So every appointment, it's like, don't let your doctor do a pelvic exam if you don't want. It's not obligatory. So if our 1 hour midwifery, like what are contractions, what can I expect, all changes because we have to also give all of this information. And we're take 15 clients a month, and we still have to do all of that, right? And it might be slow compared to other birth centers, but we're only a 3 team.
The detail needed. 15 is a
Yeah.
lot.
And we're only 3 licensed midwives in the birth center.
That's a lot.
We're a school. And so we're also teaching students to be able to understand and how to take care of our community. And so, we've informed choice. We have to really dig into that. Not only like you have the option to choose what you want, and like everything is optional, but also like the labs that they do over there are very different than the one over here. And if you were to transfer to the hospital, I need to do these extra labs because they'll keep your baby at the NICU for 2 weeks because you don't have GBS, because they don't do it in Mexico. And so,
girl, wait a minute.
Mm-hmm.
Did you say 2 weeks for GBS?
In the NICU. Mm-hmm. If the baby, let's say, has to be resuscitated, which we know resuscitation can vary from bulbing to a full-on resuscitation, any of those things
that nothing wrong.
Mm-hmm.
They just need some puffs.
Because they don't have a GBS test. And because it's not mandatory in Mexico, because they'll treat if you have signs of infection, right? And so we have to let them know, like when they come into labor and they're having that prodromal, like, hey, if you want to do this, like, really, do you want to? They only pay us $2,000 for everything. It's everything included, $2,000 birth package. And I still have to tell them, are you sure you want to go through this and have this conversation, so that they get money back? Because once they're in labor and they choose to go to the hospital because maternal exhaustion, because of all of these things, they don't get money back. And I have to take care of my community, which means I take money off of my birth center to give it back so that they can pay the hospital. Because if they don't pay the hospital, they can't fix their, they can't get a citizenship or residency or anything. And so it's just so much more. I'm gonna end it there because
you can have a whole webinar about this. We can have a whole webinar, and maybe we should think about that for next year, because people need to know what's going on.
Yes, I would love that.
Zev.
And I'll pass it to
I was just gonna hop on with your Stephanie. Being here in San Diego, we deal with a lot of the same things, and we have a lot of folks that will cross the border to come and birth here, just because their birth options on this side of Mexico, are a little bit well, they're the same country, but a lot different, financially speaking. People have different financial situations, but we have to do a lot of the same things. We're writing letters, we're getting phone calls from Border Patrol that say, hey, I have your client here at the crossing, are they actually coming, did they really pay you? And I have to, I say, yeah, and I can't not answer the phone, because if I don't, they won't cross. And then here, they're looking for midwives that speak Spanish. And so I'm one of 3 that I know of right off the top of my head, but I'm sure that there are more. I just don't know. But it's a hassle getting across the border. People think people are coming here to have babies just for the birth certificates. Believe me, it's more than that. But it's a hassle. It's a lot.
And Zev, right before you go, I just wanted to shout out a comment that came in through, like, Stephanie was saying, thank you for speaking to this. It's another Stephanie. I was in a border clinic in El Paso for 3 months last year. And yes, so many challenges, stereotyping happened. Thank you for all your work at Casa Luna. So yeah, maybe we definitely should mark this on the calendar for next year to have a bigger, broader discussion about our challenges our Native and Indigenous folks, our Chicana folks are having on the border. Zev, what you got for me?
Well, I haven't practiced in 3 years, so I don't have a ton. My home birth practice happened before I got pregnant and had hyperemesis and then stopped. And then had twins, I went back to work a little bit, but, I would say that things have changed for just like parenting in COVID is so different, and being pregnant in COVID is so different, including the way that the world has evolved in the pandemic at this point, where everyone is speaking about this like new normal or post-pandemic situation that we're in, when really like there's a higher risk for folks who are pregnant of COVID infection. And as the world moves into saying that it's like not a big thing anymore, I just think a lot about that for patients. Even sometimes we talk about like folks who are older or folks who are immunocompromised, and I feel like pregnancy is frequently being left out of the conversation in terms of COVID infections and trends and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that's relevant to location of birth and provider, and even what the rest of the clientele in your practice might be like, when we're just thinking about like comfort with risk tolerance and stuff like that. I also did want to mention that we are still trying to get the chat up and running, and I'm sorry that that's not going right now, but anyone can ask questions. Attendees can ask questions in the Q&A. And I will pass it.
Yes. And so I think for me, I just really saw midwifery always this like beautiful opportunity and for families to experience, and really I think was kind of like clouded with that, and then didn't think about what it must be like for consumers or patients, or like to, you know, be terrified about having a baby and scared about what they may experience, and exclusively, Black women. And so I feel like I spend a lot of, or even me and my team spend a lot more of our time really trying to support folks and their fear and their anxiety around birth. And like from a bigger, from a more of a macro system, just kind of saying to folks like, hey, you've chosen midwifery care. This is kind of like, our philosophy is different. Our interaction, how we engage with you is really different. And one of my famous lines is, I'm hopeful that while you are with us and care, that we learn each other and we trust each other, because birth is a roller coaster sometimes. And so I need you to feel good and confident if I'm like, hey, mama, whoever I'm working with, or, birthing person, this name, I think it's time for us to go to the hospital. I think it's time for us to have some help. That you feel confident that there isn't any malintent or, something, out of convenience that's not related to what your birth is. So I feel like we're dealing with a lot more families that are distrustful. For a long time, I felt like people were choosing midwifery and kind of like putting us on this pedestal of like, you guys are angels. Versus now where like everybody can be an enemy. And so lots and lots of distrust. And to me, that also plays out in birth, right? So my best advice I give folks is you have to surrender. When you're having a baby, you've got to surrender. And I truly believe that there are, my students and my team laugh about it all the time, but emotional dystocias are real. If you are locked in your head in fear, or for whatever it is, whether the birth, all of it, who's taking care of you, what's happening at home, if you are locked in here, I almost feel like you can add an energetic band in your pelvis and prevent your baby from coming. News here, y'all. I'm calling it the energetic dystocia, but I believe it. I've seen it. So really working on trying to help birthing people address that fear and anxiety that they are, instead of this being a lovely life transition, they are stressed out. They're real stressed out. Thanks everybody. That was some great answers for that.
I wanted to say, we also have something like that, but we call it family dystocia. Where like all the families like in there, and with COVID, because it was like we had to restrict and we need to protect our pregnant people. a lot of family members, like there were used to be 30 people like waiting, at our birth center. And then all of a sudden there was like no family to socials. And people were coming and birthing and, and so I was like, I mean, I guess COVID did something good for these people. Like,
yes, birth is not a spectator sport. I am not a fan of folks that are just coming to watch you. I will commonly also, I've been known to put people out. I'm gonna go ahead and say it. I have put people out because that's not what this is about. But that's real. That is absolutely real.
You want a cup of tea? Come on, let's go outside. We can have a cup of tea together.
Right.
Yeah, around
you want
here
to
we
add
send
something?
folks for breakfast burritos. Y'all want to go get a breakfast burrito? Because she could probably use a breakfast burrito. You should go. There's a place. It's like a half hour down the road.
Yeah,
And
I
then you
like
can come back with
I
breakfast
like putting
burritos really
people in
quick.
charge of ordering the food afterwards because they can't agree. That takes at least 40 minutes.
Yeah, get on out. By the way, Nikki's birth center is gorgeous, and she has a really good dessert place right across the street. I just want to let people know that.
You was
It's a
keeping
selling
secrets
point.
when I came to visit.
It's
When
a
are you
selling point.
inviting?
Yeah, come on over. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
right across the street, coffee shop, whole nine.
Good
Stephanie's
coffee
getting up.
too.
I'm on my way. Yes, yes, yes. But I tell people that too, though, Miss Ebony. I say to folks when I'm giving tours of the birth center that they could pretty much have anybody in the birth room they would like. However, that person has to be helpful, and they have to be helpful in my estimation, not
Mhm,
necessarily yours.
mhm.
Mine, because our birth room is sizable and it's lovely and it's well equipped and all of that, but it gets small really fast when there's a bunch of people in there, right?
Say
And
that
we have,
again.
yeah, so we have a lovely waiting room area that they can go and be in. And, I've had families be perfectly happy with that. But I do have the occasional like family member that I'll say, okay, everybody outside, go hang out. She said not to be in here. And then I'll see people like creeping, poking heads around corners. I'm like, get out. So yes, midwives will have your back. Absolutely. You may not like the way they do it sometimes, but they are always working in the best interest of the birth and the baby and the birthing person.
That's right. Um, well, that brings me to my next question for this crew. Uh, so it's really impossible, especially after you caught like at least a good 10, for you to be like, this is my favorite birth. And so I'm gonna make this question about what are elements in births that you have seen that like just grab you or that you like love? So elements, they could be anything you want. Anything from like, this is my favorite midwife to be with me in this birth because like she knows how to anticipate what I need. She throws me them gloves, all the things to, you know, um, you know, you watch the interaction between a couple and like just the love that you could see radiating between them. But what are some of your favorite elements that you like to see or feel at birth?
I'm glad you asked it that way because sometimes folks will ask me, how many babies that I delivered, and I just tell them it doesn't. For me, it doesn't matter because I'm over 1,000. It doesn't make a difference in terms of numbers and experience. It's more or less the individual family, and that's
Mhm.
what I remember. And for me, my like top moment I love is when I get the partner to cry. That is like the best one. Or when I get the partner to literally touch the baby, because sometimes they want to get there and they're like, no, no, you do it. I'm like, why? This is you're going to remember this more than me. So I like that. The other thing I like is when I change either the birthing person or the partner's mother and they're there. And then afterwards, even though they were like giving me a lot of smack about the type of birth or whatever they wanted, and then they think differently. That I love. Or when they say something to me like, well, how did you know what time the baby's going to come? Because sometimes not that I can predict, because everybody knows you can't predict,
I
but
was like,
sometimes,
could you be rich?
yeah, exactly. I would never have to schedule a vacation because I know exactly whose babies are coming. But some people I have been able to, and I don't want to say psychic, but you just kind of know what time this is going to happen, whether you're going to be here for 2 hours or 20 hours. So, sometimes I'm able to predict it. And then the family's like, oh my gosh, how did Shanisha? I'm like, I don't, it's just one of those things, and it does make me feel happy that I kind of knew, but I didn't really know. So those are the ones that I would say.
Yeah, don't tell anybody. Be like, yes, I knew. I knew what time it's gonna be.
Nikki,
Stephanie.
sorry, I didn't mean to kick it to you.
Are we
Oh
messing
no,
up the
that's
order?
okay. Let's see, favorite elements of birth. I love the way that music changes a birth. I love when my families come in with a playlist and it because I'm very connected to like music and performance and all of those things. And so when I hear a family talking about what they're going to put on their playlist, it really, it strikes me because I'll go and listen to some of their, I'm like, oh, hey, okay, we can listen to this. All right, cool. And then I love when families have a birth playlist versus a push playlist, like a labor playlist. I had one family and little anecdote. I had one family that had this wonderful playlist. It was like all, Enya and stuff like that. It was all chill and she was laboring and doing really well. And then she started to feel the spontaneous urges to push. And so the next thing I knew, she had on Wu-Tang and NWA. And I was like, whoa, hey, now okay, we just changed it up in here. All right. And I had one family that had she was doing kind of the same thing. It was more like 90s R&B for her labor, but then when the birth came, she put on like who was it, Cardi B and Megan the Stallion. And when she finally had her baby, Megan the Stallion was on it. She was laying on the bed with the baby on her chest. She says, "I am the baddest bitch on the planet right now." And I said, "Yes, you are. What else am I supposed to say to that?" So music and connecting to something that you connect with outside of birth really brings an element of like that person's safety and comfort and where they find their joy into the birth for them. So I love that. I love the faces of the partners when they catch the babies, especially the ones that have said, "Oh yeah, sure, no problem, I'll do it." And then they see this whole process. And, as the baby is starting to emerge, I go, "Well, get down here." And they're like, "Oh no. Oh, I'm good. I'm good." Or the parents that get down there and and then they look at me like, "Is this it?" Yeah, that's just wait right there. It's all good. Okay, you sure? Yeah, just hang out. It's coming.
Gloves. How many pairs of gloves do I need?
Oh yeah, none. I told them, I was like, "You don't have to have any. You
Right.
can have them if you want them, but you don't have to have any. It's fine." And then the disappointment on the faces of the partners that don't get to go, like where the birthing person is like, "You can't leave," and then they can't leave, and they look at me like, "Can I come?" I'm like, She said no, sorry." So the interactions, I think the music brings a lovely element, and a really engaged, involved partner brings another level. It brings it to another level because I tend to really connect with the partners as well. So I think just being able to see how they connect with each other and how they connect with other things outside of this arena of birth and labor, and how they bring their personal joy into that space is something that I love to see it every time. Every time. And Senora Stephanie.
Can I just jump in here? Nikki brought up something real important too. The type of music that they choose lets you know more about them. Sort of like how Ebony mentioned, you get to know this person, but you know a different element depending on what music they pick. And then you're like, well, I really thought I knew them, but I didn't know them into this music. So.
Yeah, again, different, very different things. I think for me, just I think the power of the mind. A lot of our clients travel for 6 hours from Mexico to birth with us. I think we had someone from Brazil once. Like, I think we've had people from all over the world. And so because they want to go home back to their families, they're anxious and they're like, "Es que, yeah, I want to have my baby. And I see the power of the mind of like, because there's so much pressure on this birth happening, it doesn't happen. And then when they walk into their appointment after many conversations of like, you have to let it go. It's going to happen when it's going to happen. You can't put these like boundaries on yourself. And then they walk in and they're just like, "That's it. It's going to happen. I give up. I'm not gonna, it's whatever." And then what it happened once she left, she came back, asked to go to the bathroom. And I thought she was just like driving close. And she's like, "I need to go to the bathroom." She walked in. I was like, "Sure, come into the bathroom." one of the midwives was like, there's something odd here, and opened a door, and she was crowning in the toilet in the clinic area in the middle of a clinic day. So it was just the power of the mind. The moment they like go and then it happens, I really like love, and it's like the best thing for me when I'm not needed. Um, I feel like it happens a lot where I don't know cómo se dice, se aferran, like they want to have it because they think they owe something to me. And it's like, no, like I'm just here to support you. Like I'm not here to do anything but to hold your space. And so when clients come in and they're like, yeah, yeah, and they treat me kind of like, I don't need you, I got this. Like for me, it's the best thing because I get to just sit back and just watch her do it and make sure that everything's running, which is what I love to do. Just kind of be like hands off, dad catching the baby, or just coming into the bathroom, the birth room, and just like being like, it's coming, and I just have to like run real quick and like catch the baby. Because some women hold their babies in while they're crossing the border. So like they come in and they're holding that baby, and the moment they step in, they're just like fast, like I'm ready. And one of the things that's odd, I don't know if it's just a cultural thing, and for us, but the vernix, um, the grandmothers and the aunts, like when the baby's born and has a lot of vernix, like we'll tell them like, oh, this is really good for your face. Like it's really good. Para el cutis is what we call it, like, and they'll be like, really? And they'll just like grab some and they'll put it in their faces. And they're like walking around with pieces of vernix, that hasn't been absorbed yet. And they're just so happy and they just embrace it. It's not disgusting and it's not dirty. It's just like, great, give me some more. And when I see those instances, like they could be funny, but for me, it's like my culture, like people with all these colonization and the breaking down of traditions and cultural rituals and all of these things, and seeing it being ingrained in our beings. And when we think we've lost it, and seeing it in my community just brings me so much like joy to see them do that. Mm-hmm.
I'll piggyback on that, Stephanie. To tell you that one of the first home birth midwives I worked with was a lovely white midwife, but she did that, and I was horrified. I was like, "What are you doing? Oh my God!" And she said, "Oh my gosh, yes, this is so great." And then she proceeded to put that baby's vernix on her face and told me that it was for her, oh, it's so good for crow's feet. And I looked at her, I said, I'm Black, what are crow's feet? But then I was like, oh my God, don't do that.
Yes.
I was so horrified at the fact that she would do that to someone else's baby, like your own baby, sure, that's one thing, but somebody else's baby?
Grandbaby, your
Lady,
grandniece, yeah, sure.
lady, what are
But
you doing?
no, they used to say like old L&D nurses would do that, take vernix or whatever. But yeah, I feel you on that. Elements for me, I love when birthing people are in the zone. That one that like doesn't like want to talk to you, doesn't want to be touched, and they like find corners and spaces that are tight. I've had people labor really well, like in the dark, but they're in a zone, and like nothing's really said until you hear like they're starting to kind of give you that push, and it's like, oh, we're probably ready to go. I also love the other side of the spectrum where people are comedians. Oh my God, there are some funny people in labor who like crack me up, the whole time they're in labor. So I like both. I like the ones that are quiet and in the zone, and the ones that are really funny. Um, I love, don't judge me, bloody birth mucus. Baby, when I look down there and it's that thick, oh, we good. Like, we good. We're not going to tear, and that baby's about to come. I love me some good mucus. My bitch used to make fun of me. I was like, I am meditating on having that at my birth, because I know when I usually see that good slippery mucus, almost always they never tear. And fun fact, I'm also a midwife that hates repairing. So I will do everything to protect the perineum. I hate repairing. And so I maintain like the highest intact rate. I hate repairing. I feel like midwives who like to sew also like to do repairs. Other elements, sibling catches, love when the older, like, the bigger age difference who are like really like excited and ready to be there, partner catches. And then I love gorilla birth. That's what I like to call it. When like, I mean, one time I caught a baby, I think I'm lying. And I'm not very in shape, but I'm in shape when I need to be. But I caught this baby laying on my stomach with my arm extended, one-handed, because she was like having a hard time in the bathroom and we were trying to navigate. She wanted to go back to the bed and I was like, okay, and I'm gonna follow you wherever you go. She got right outside that door and like started to crown, was on all fours and was sliding on her own stomach. And so the space was tight. So I just had to reach and I caught it. Didn't touch the floor. I caught it. But love those, like, the one that comes in and all of a sudden you see hair and it's a whole baby, you know, and all different type of positions, crouched up between the bed and the door, the couch, or whatever the case may be. I like gorilla birth. I'm not as flexible as I used to be. I have to do some stretching, but when I can, I love me some good gorilla birth.
We
I
call
love
that
that.
we call that a Cirque du Soleil birth around here.
Yeah.
Cirque du Soleil, because you got to get in all these crazy positions and feet over here and arms and stuff. And I think this is cool.
Yup. I mean, tell me you're a midwife, not telling me a midwife when you've had your face against somebody's butt because it's tight and you're trying to get where you need to get. It's happened. It's happened.
So, okay. So one time there was this client sitting on a birth stool and, she was, pushing. She was like actively pushing and it wasn't working for her. So she stood up and I was kind of like on the back and she kind of needed support. So I kind of swoop in between her and the birth stool to like hold her, between like her arms while she like kind of squatted. It was like midair squat. And I was so tired that I kind of started going back, from carrying her. And I sat on the birth stool and she sat on my legs and she used me as a birth stool.
That is awesome, Stephanie.
And I love that. I love that you said that.
Midwife birth stool. That's awesome.
Yeah. So I love how you said that. Yeah, like those happen all the time when they pick the odd corner and it's in the middle of the bed and you have to kind of squeeze under the bed so that you can like put your hand in the front. I love those.
I remember I had one partner said I should rename a maneuver when you have the mom on the toilet bowl and you get them to lean forward because you can't scoop your hand under the toilet bowl because the vagina's so down, and then you lift and bring up the baby. He was like, "You need to name that maneuver." I was like, "You don't name it, you just deliver the baby that way." But these are the things that you get your body or yourself into in order to be able to, support the person how they need to be supported. And that's why, when labor's starting for most of us, we're just in the zone. Even though the birthing person is in the zone, so are you, because you don't know what way you're going to have to move your body. Like you said, Ebony, to get ready to do whatever you need.
I mean, I'm old now, so I definitely have to do some stretching, definitely if I know what's going on.
But you know what? I think it's beautiful because I think it comes from like being different than OBs, right? That have all of these things next to them and they don't have to think and plan and see things coming and put things together. We're like detectives. We're like, wait, what? That way she moved, that baby's not coming, she needs to do, we need to fix that. And so it just kind of becomes second nature to the point where how fast to run, how to throw yourself so that you can catch that baby. We're not football players. We weren't trained to catch anything. And to get to the point where you can just feel it, it's an instinct. We don't even have to think about it. Like, it's just second nature. I love being in this place as a student. I never thought I would get to that place. And being here is just like, I did it. Yay.
Yeah, I had a mom that was a yoga teacher. She actually went into child's pose and put her bottom on my legs and she delivered her baby into my lap. And I was like, okay, well, we could all circle around and learn how to do this. This would be great. I loved this. This was awesome. Thank you so much. But I agree with you, Stephanie. And I was going to bring up the fact that, these are things that are not generally done in a hospital setting. We're not going to catch a baby. I'm not laying on the floor in the hospital, so let's start there. But we're not, oftentimes moms aren't given the option of, being in whatever position they need to be in, and knowing that their practitioner is going to just follow them.
Man.
That tells them, you're in charge of this. I'm just following you around with a Doppler and a glass of water and a honey stick. I'm following you. And that, I think, really reasserts the fact that when a person chooses to come to a birth center, they're going to be supported in whatever way they need to be supported. And if that means that I have to beg them to get out of the shower so they don't have a baby in the shower, then that's what I do. But they will also trust me enough to say, oh, okay, I guess I got to get out of the shower now. I don't want to get out of the shower, and I hate you for asking, but okay.
That's right. I hate you for
I
asking
love
that.
shower births.
I mean, I have mixed feelings about it, because definitely if we're in the shower, a lot of times my largest baby that I've ever caught was in the shower. She was toe lacking, and yeah, I promise you, when the head came out, I was getting ready to prepare to work at a mall kiosk, and I was so nervous, but like butter, because that's how they can do you. That's how babes can do you. You can fight with a 6-pounder, fight, and then that 10.5-pounder, like easy, like butter. Right. But when the head comes out, I'm gonna be honest with you, I was like, yeah, that's it. That's it for me. I'm gonna work at Blockbuster. I'm gonna find a video store and find somewhere else to work, because this ain't gonna be it. But yeah, Nikki, I've just caught a baby on a stretcher less than 3 months ago. Like literally on my stomach. She had crawled up the top of the stretcher crowning. And so I had to lay in the stretcher with her to one-handed catch. Yeah, it happens. It absolutely happens. That was really, really fun. Now, wait, Zev, did you have any birth elements that you wanted to add?
Sure, I can share quickly. I've just been laughing so hard listening to all y'all's stories. Thank you so much for sharing. I was thinking about this, and you sort of spoke to this too, Ebony, but that like line that people cross between early labor and active labor, and then again, kind of at transition. But I really love that, especially for first-time parents who are often kind of like in their head, very excited, sometimes anxious, like, just not knowing what this experience is going to be like, and not knowing what that like real active labor frame of mind and like somatic experience is. And especially for the folks who are just like, am I doing it? And then there's like this point where the flip switches and they're just like in their body in a really profound way. And I just really love that moment for people when they find it, and that their like physiology is happening, the hormones are happening, and their like heart and brain space have kind of come together. I just think that's like a really beautiful moment. Also, one time I caught a baby who the parent was stepping into the birth pool. She had one leg in and the baby came flying out, and I caught the baby like before baby dumped into the water. It was like the craziest catch of my career, and I love that birth. I actually thought of that one when you were like, we don't talk about like having a favorite birth. I was like, yeah, but that one. The dad was supposed to catch, and he was like, I'm so glad I wasn't supposed to catch. Or like he was like, I wasn't gonna catch that thing.
It's so funny you mentioned that one, because I had one similar to like that type of birth, but it was a fellow midwife, midwife in training. And thank goodness I was closer to the birthing person than she was. So I ended up delivering as she stepped into the tub. And she was like, well, thank goodness you were close. I was like, no, I wish you were closer so you could have caught the baby. But sometimes that leg lift is that angle and it just comes in. Yeah.
Yes. So that brings me to my next question for this lovely esteemed panel. Unless Zev, did you see any other questions pop up anywhere else? I don't see any.
I don't see any others in the Q&A, but do just want to invite any participants to be asking midwives questions here. Like, this is a space for, we want to share with you the things that we're thinking about, but also we want to answer the questions that you've got. So feel free to drop those questions in the Q&A anytime, or unmute yourself to ask them.
Awesome. So my next question for this crew is, what are some of the things that you are wanting for the future of midwifery? Like what are you visioning as something you would like to see with our profession, with what you're doing, with, even as simple as how you're engaging with families? What is something you want to see in the future with midwifery? I'm gonna go ahead and start real quick and just say more Black led and owned birth centers, of course. Definitely more Black, Indigenous, Native midwives. Coming out of education programs that are not harmful. Apprenticeships that are not harmful, and not in a slew of debt. And if it is going to be a bunch of debt, making a way for it to get paid for consistently. Those are some of my few that I'm really hopeful for to happen for the future of midwifery.
I love all of those, and I guess I'll just add a couple more on that. Maybe we would have graduate medical education be a thing for our preceptors. I think one of the challenges with midwifery in general is we don't have enough people to train the next set of midwives. And so I think if there was an educational money component that may allow us to have more midwives. And I want maybe even our country to recognize how birth centers can be those leaders to be able to offer maternity care in a different way. There's just so many things I think midwifery needs, and that we maybe also all midwives, all types of midwives would be more united in this fight. I think sometimes we segment ourselves depending on how we feel about certain things, and we aren't always united. Yeah, I'll turn it over. Nikki, you're next.
Oh no, I'm still, working through my answer in my head while being surprised by my own name being called. In the future, I would love to see integration of freestanding birth centers into the healthcare system. I want to see us recognized as skilled, qualified practitioners. We're not witches. We're not out here just rubbing dirt on stuff and crossing our fingers and dancing under the full moon. Well, maybe some of us are, but point being, we are skilled practitioners. We have gone to school, we have gotten training, and we have looked at the medical establishment and said, no thanks. And that we can do things not necessarily better, but different, in a different way that respects the dignity and the life experience of the people involved. In that way, we get to call, we call ourselves, oh, we're the best country on the planet or whatever, when we are doing a complete disservice to birthing folks, Black women in particular, brown women in particular. We shouldn't be suffering the shortcomings of something as simple and straightforward as birth when there are people out here who want to do it. So make it so that the members of the United States of America have that choice. We always talk about choices in this country and how important they are, and everybody should have them. Why suddenly, when it comes to having babies and women's bodies or uteruses in general, all of a sudden everybody's like, well, now hold on a second, right? That's not okay. I want to see midwives integrated into the normal birth process, just like they do in Sweden. When you get pregnant, you call the midwife. And then the midwife says, yeah, no, this is not for me. You need to go over and see Dr. Whoever. We are not we're not these, fringe providers. We are educated. We know how the system works. We've been in the system. We got knowledge. We have resources. And I want to see, insurance become very accepting of, oh, birth centers. Found out the other day that a cash pay for a birth at a hospital-based birth center here in San Diego, I won't mention the name. They know who they are. $15,000. $15,000. That is the cash pay price. If you want to go to their hospital and you want to pay them $15,000, and that's just the low intervention, no medication. We're just going to watch you, make sure you don't die kind of birth. Whereas you get twice as much for half the price at my birth center, down the road. And yes, we will additionally make sure that you don't die in addition to everything else that we do. And insurance companies need to realize that not only are we providing low tech, high touch care, we are very well versed in normal, natural, undisturbed birth, but we are also very clear on what our lane is. And we are very aware of like, nope, this is now out of my scope. You got to go. Sorry. And nobody likes telling their clients that, but we are very clear on what our lanes are and what our boundaries are to keep families safe. And I think that insurance companies and the United States as a whole needs to recognize that midwives, we are out here doing this work and you don't see us because we're so successful. We're out here doing our thing and we're catching these babies and we're keeping these families happy and healthy. And that's why people in hospitals are like, oh, I've never heard of you because you didn't have to. I wasn't in your hospital. So yeah, you haven't heard of me because I've been out here doing the work. And so I didn't need you. Oh, y ahora, Stephanie.
So my wildest dreams of like this is wildest. It's not wildest, it's gonna happen. But for our community, specifically in here in the border area where clients and our patients and clients and sisters and mothers and everybody expects to be giving a cierre de cadera, which is like a bone closing ceremony where it's just expected. Like that's part of the care. At 6 weeks, you come for your appointment, you get a pap, and you get, binded. And you have that, ritual to move on from the postpartum period and go back to your normal life. And I feel like that acknowledgement to your body is so crucial. That bringing that warmthness back into the body also is so important. In our community beliefs, the chakras and the openings and all of these things. The temazcales, I don't know if y'all know this, like sweat lodges. They're also pretty common in Mexican culture. Some people birth in the sweat lodges, and what I would want is so that is also incorporated with people have the option like monthly, like we're gonna have a sweat lodge. Everybody who birthed and who wants to come in and close that chapter can come, and it's part of your healthcare, right? It's just traditional practices is healthcare as well, and getting to a point where people recognize, like acknowledge it, and people don't expect anything less than that. I also want to, which is one of my dreams in building this nonprofit that I'm working on, is to get funding for students to the point where I can possibly buy a house that's fully furnished, where I can house my fellow Chicana, Indigenous, Native students who want to learn midwifery but have to travel because they have no safe space to go, and we're like the closest thing to it being existed. And the unfortunate thing, which I love that Shanisha, you brought it up, the students, was it you? I think it was you. I'm sorry, I had a birth last night, so I'm all but students, by the time they're licensed or done with midwifery, are burnt out because it's hard. There's no support. You go into debt. Becoming a midwife sometimes I can sometimes be like, I'm very privileged that I got to be a midwife And I still had a really hard time passing an arm. I took it 5 times. That's like $3,000 that I spent because I was stubborn, and I was like, 500 cc's is not a hemorrhage, because my community bleeds more than that, you know, and that's not based on my people. It's not based on my community. It's not based. And so I was very rebellious, and I did it. But by the time I finished, I was also burned out. I was also like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to take this test again. I don't want to hear about it. I don't want to look at it. I don't want nothing to do with it. And I almost quit, you know? And so if that's my story, I can only imagine other students, you know, that are going through that. And so how can I, with the resources that I have, build a system where I can house them, pay them gas stipends, where everything as I can help my fellow, you know, BIPOC folks get licensed so that they're not burned out. And then we'll have more preceptors, because they will have time and the energy to teach other brown students. And so I want to build a school for people who don't want to be licensed. I don't know how am I going to do that, but all of those things.
I'm going to jump on one of the things that you mentioned, Stephanie, that I know personally is that if like Ebony asked about what would you change with midwifery, would be the AMCB, because that's one of the tests that CMs and CNMs have to take in order to be licensed. I would like that test to not have a limit of 3 times, because I know personally at least 6 people that are BIPOC that were unable to pass that test after 3 times, and they're not practicing midwifery. They're doing other things. I would like to be able to change that. Like other careers, you can take it multiple times. And when you said that, that was like on my other list of problems that I think would be helpful. Imagine all those midwives out there that we could have, and whether or not they want to be licensed or not, but if they did sit for this, what do they do now? They take that education, they spend all that money, and they do nothing.
I just want to also add the challenges with admitting that a lot of this is test taking skills. It also feeds into white supremacy culture. And there's plenty of room for discussion about test standards, you know, regulations and all those different pieces. I absolutely believe that they have their place and that they're important, definitely in particular spaces. I'm just asking for more grace and consideration for alternatives.
Yes, because I didn't know what saucer meant. Because I've never heard that word. Saucer for me is like you mean a UFO? Like, is that, you know? And then somebody was like, oh, it's like a coaster.
Now
like,
you know, you were like, listen, these people are crazy. They talk about UFOs on this test. Is this really a test?
We had a midwife here who is not a native English speaker, and she's a native Spanish speaker, and she had to take the test like 4 or 5 times. She's one of the most talented midwives I know. And yet she was kept from licensure by the test that is supposed to be for the North American Registry of Midwives. So it seems to me like the test should be given in English, Spanish, French, you know, for our Ontario sisters out there. So we need to do better with the test.
Well, in the schools, right? Because I learned everything in English. So if I were to, and I'm really good at Spanish, if I were to sit down and take a Spanish test, I would fail it worse than the English one, because the words are very different and they don't, you know, it's just a whole different thing. And so getting to a point where there's school available, like Spanish speaking schools and teachers who can teach you in your native language so that you can take the test in your native language. I think that would be, you know, it's the whole system. Like the whole system has to change. And I think us having these conversations openly really opened those doors for those dynamics and paradigms to shift, because people are listening now. And we've seen that, right? Like all of these people like, wait, what? What's happening? Like, what do you do? And, you know, and so, yeah, that's it. I lost my
I want to also add to folks who may be on this webinar who are not really familiar. with, training and education. So, you get the opportunity to train somewhere that's not near your home. You have to then pay for where you're going to live, eat. Um, and that is like extreme in some places when you have to travel to train. So I love the idea of a house. There's some other folks around this country who've also talked about having just student housing for people to be there for like 5, 6 months to get their training and like not have to worry about trying to pay for things. But we actually have a great question sitting in our bank. You ready for this, guys? Um, so definitely lots of folks are asking about what can they do to increase the role of access to midwifery and birth centers, and then what would be the role of folks who are not midwives? Who'd like to take a stab at that one?
I'll go. I think that the role of folks who are not midwives, um, the best thing that they can do is support their community and asking questions. Just get more information. We have a lot of people that will speak very negatively about birth centers and about midwives with no knowledge of any of us ever. Oh yeah, no, I don't think that's a good idea. Well, why not? Come into the birth center, come talk to us, come learn about what we do. It's really important that these birthing folks are supported by people who are not going to judge their choices, right? You can't judge their choice if you don't know anything about it, right? I mean, you can. Lots of folks do. You shouldn't, but you can, right? So learn more about midwifery. Go to your local birth center and just say, "Hey, I just want to know what y'all do around here," because you can bet any one of us on here with a birth center, if you walked in and said, "Hey, I just want to learn a little bit more about the birth center," we would take you in, we will give you coffee, we will feed you, we will talk to you all day because we love what we do. We feel what we do is important, and we feel that the choice to come to a birth center is something that everyone should have an opportunity to make. So don't speak out of school about midwifery care and about birth center care. Learn what you're going to talk about before you start talking about it, and support the choices that people make. Don't give them grief because it's not what you would do. Lots of moms say, "Well, my mom is worried about me." I said, "When's the last time your mom had a baby?" "Oh, it was you? Who's 30?" Okay, so here's the difference between what happened for your mom and what could potentially happen for you. So we need people to understand what midwifery is and the difference between what we do and what happens in an OB's office. When people are telling me that they have clocked that they spent a total of an hour with their OB who didn't even deliver their baby, right? The hour meaning an hour over the entire pregnancy, not one day. Over 40 weeks of pregnancy, this person spent an hour total with her OB who then didn't deliver her baby, right? They need to know, I catch all my babies. Unless I am under something heavy, I am going to catch all my babies. And that is a level of confidence that you don't have when it comes to birthing in a hospital. So find out more before, you turn your nose up at us.
And I would just add, like, because we are out here smaller practice delivering in hospitals. Just don't leave us out. Um, Looking at the size of the group, when you're deciding on who you're going to get care with, and asking if they share call, because that's going to be also the deciding factor. But advocacy is huge, and whatever you learn when you go by that birth center or learn about midwives, that's your next party. You're hanging out with your friends. Do you guys know about midwives? Spread the word. Spread the word.
That was the one I was going to lean into when that question was asked, is that, do you vote, and do you know who your local politicians are, because that makes a difference. Will they fund your birth center? Will they be able to give money to your local birth center? Will they make a policy that makes no sense? Do they have existing policies that doesn't allow midwives or midwifery to flourish in your neighborhood? Are they stamping on, reproductive rights? Because some of the stuff does go hand in hand. And what role you can play to continue to advocate for things like this, so that this way other people can have the same choice that you had. And what I always remind a lot of families I give care to, I say, well, you were able to do this because your insurance carrier allowed us to be able to work together. What about the people that didn't? Do you want to play it forward and pay for someone else if maybe you have the means? If not, then I need you to consider advocating so other insurers can make this experience happen for other people. Because otherwise, it's like it only happens to those people that can afford this type of care. And that's not the type of care that I want all people to have. So,
I think I want to take like a different approach to the question, and just highlight the also, again, providers, right? OBs, nurses, everyone in the medical system. I feel like one, advocacy, right? Like everybody who knows about midwifery, if you hear a provider, someone talking negatively or saying false information about midwives, and just be like, hey, like, why don't you explore that and really figure out what's happening? But I think it's also, this is, I feel like, a direct thing for me for the providers. We have to get past the point where past the same question. What do midwives do? What exactly do you do? What exactly is your scope of practice? It's like, read the laws. It's right there. Look it up. And so I think a lot of the problems that we have, yes, it's the community, but the community hears what the providers say. The community hears what the nurses say. I remember saying something about midwifery when I was in labor at a hospital, because I had hospital births before I even knew there were midwives. And I remember I mentioned something about like midwives, and like, oh no, don't go to midwives because they don't know what they're doing. And this is a nurse, and we do a lot of similar things that they do, and they don't know what so midwives are knowledgeable, and we know what OB scopes and nurses, and because we want to give that information to our clients. Well, where is that in return for those providers, for people who have concurrent care with midwives? And I feel like that's what really could change everything. It's providers really understanding and getting past their ego and learning what we do and where we stand and how we work.
Yeah. Just respect, just absolute respect. And unfortunately, it's everywhere when it comes to midwifery. I had a teacher when I was in midwifery school who wanted to talk about politics. And I was like, I don't want to talk about politics. And she was like, to be a midwife is to be political. It is going to be necessary at some point in your career. And so I would say for folks that are not midwives, answer the question, Ebony, I apologize. I slipped off there. But for people that are not midwives, you have so much more power than you know. Like, I need people running for office to be scared about not getting votes if they're making, supporting crass decisions and bills and laws. They should be scared. Like, oh, I better not do that because I already know these folks, are demanding. And while we're on the topic of demanding, if you have an insurance, demand that they cover. Like, we need more people to start demanding. They respond to consumer demand. I have seen them make changes based off of consumer demand. Demand, hey, you should be covering, if I want to have a home birth, if I want to have a birth center birth. And, let's call out the monopoly that's sometimes created with getting people credentialed for coverage. Because the reality too is that it allows the profession to continue to be oppressed, because again, one of the key pieces of oppression is power. And by, the monopoly with regulation, licensure, credentialing with insurances just continues to limit. And those are spaces as a non-midwife that you can jump in and advocate. And if you want to really kick it up a notch, be an activist, a midwife activist, and fight for the cause, because there are definitely families that need you. So we are coming to the end of this lovely, lovely call. So I wanted to, before I close it out, wanted to see if the lovely panel has any kind of like warm words or anything they want to leave in this day with.
Before we do that, I was just going to say that we have a person in the Q&A that said that they are trying to make sure that Argentina is including midwives in their national health care. They're integrating into the system of public health and creating houses for midwives. So Argentina is doing some rockin' stuff.
That's dope.
I'm glad someone shared that because I definitely was not aware of it. I guess as we close this out, and looking at Birth Center Week, because I want to stay focused to that as well. I think the biggest thing I would like everybody to sort of think about is how a midwife might have shaped your life, or how a midwife could shape your life, and how you may want to figure out how to help to make both of those two things kind of come together so that we can have more birth centers because we need them. They are our solution to our current crisis. And I think if we had more, people could have the options they needed and maybe feel more secure. I'll turn it over to Nikki.
What would say the question again, Ebony? I was watching Tranisha again, and I forgot what you asked.
I was just, don't be stressed, Lovey. I was just saying, if there's anything that we leave in this space today and all the things that we discussed that you just want to make sure people know as we're leaving.
I want to make sure that people know, and it's our little tagline for our birth center, is that you don't have to have a baby to have a midwife. People neglect the breadth and depth of scope of a midwife's practice. So, right underneath our logo, it says you don't have to have a baby to have a midwife, and that invites conversation. It's like, oh, so wait, like you can, because the first thing I get is a lot of people going, "Oh, girl, midwife, I am so done with that." I'm like, are you still having periods? Okay, then you need to have PAPs, right? You know what? I do those, right? People need to, know that we're out here for them in many, 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 many stages of the life of a uterus owner. We're there when you start your period. I teach sex ed classes. We're there when you're thinking about getting pregnant. I teach classes about fertility. We have a nurse practitioner who's a fertility specialist in our clinic. We talk about, when you finally do get pregnant. We also talk to you if you lose that pregnancy. We're very much wraparound care providers, but people just think we just catch babies. But we are so much more of a dynamic population of care providers than that. It's like, don't sell us short. Ask your midwife, see what they got going on.
Mm-hmm.
Is it me?
Oh, sorry. No, I was
Stephanie.
gonna say, yeah, hold up, Stephanie.
I think something that I want people to know, leaving this webinar, is that advocacy is very important and support of midwifery is very important. I don't think I've ever felt or seen so much movement in midwifery as there is right now. And I do want to thank, Birth Center Equity and Beloved Economy for like really taking care of the caretakers. I've had definitely some moments as a midwife where I'm like, who's my midwife? Like, who's gonna take care of me? And yes, my colleagues can be my midwives, but it's different, right? Like, I want to go look and I want to, meet and see who's the perfect fit for me. And it's very hard. And it's very hard to find my provider, my midwifery provider. And so I want to really just say thank you for this, because this is really going to highlight midwifery a lot. And I feel like it's going to be very transformative. And I think that because of the movement, I feel the next generation of midwives, not only will they be able to catch babies and just worry about catching babies and not have to start nonprofits and do all of these things, because we're going to change the system. And the only way we're going to be able to change the system is for people who log into these webinars, who ask the questions, who inform themselves, who share it. So if you're here, share it, tell whoever you know, because this is how the impact's going to be made. And so I just want to again thank Birth Center Equity and Beloved Economy and all of this, because this is amazing. And I'm so privileged to be part of this. Thank you.
Zev, did you want to add anything?
Sure. Yeah, I'll just say that really go check out Birth Center Equity. I think so if we're looking for ways to plug in to expand access for clients to have more midwives in their communities, like Birth Center Equity is doing some really incredible work. And you can also view the whole network of birth centers who are part of Birth Center Equity on the website. And maybe there's a birth center in your state or in your community who's right, we've all got different skill sets. Some people have good tech skills. People always need help with their website, or some people have photography skills. Some people have social media stuff. Some people have colonized wealth that needs to go somewhere, right? Let's give money to these movements. And so I think those are all really powerful ways that communities can put birth at the center of our movement spaces, is just by really getting involved with the birth centers that are active or developing in the communities that we live in or even around. So check it out.
Thank you. And I would just add, I hope this was just a small snapshot, but just for you to really, really see some of the passion that's in midwifery and what we're trying to do, the love, the joy. I hope you got to feel some of that today as well, as we're sharing kind of our birth elements. And also just, I'm hoping that folks gain that we have a lot of work to do and we need help, and we need you to spread the word, and put up this fight with us. Let's start demanding change. I'm tired of being nice. That's what I like to tell people now. I'm tired of being nice. I would love to thank Birth Center Equity. I would also love to, just like Stephanie was saying, we should have probably said this in the beginning, Beloved Birth and Economy, just everybody out here on this movement right now trying to really, really elevate, push the growth of Birth Center, and especially for oppressed communities. Because definitely, we all know how transformational it can be for these communities that we serve. So thank you to everybody who came today. Thank you to all my lovely panelists. This was really, really fun. And I survived my toddler not coming down here. So with that being said, unless you have something else you want to add, thank everybody for coming, and we'll see you at the next webinar. Right?
And we'll be sending out a survey after this. It's a quick 3-question, I think. Julie, is it the similar one as last webinar? There will be a survey link being sent to your email, just to give us some feedback on how you felt about today's event and anything you'd like to share. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Everybody have a good rest of their day.
Gracias, Mario.
Gracias, Mario.
Mm-hmm.